Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about Ssangsu Geombup ship Ibon, Form 12, Section 4. Yeah. Yeah. As you probably noticed, there's a lot of recycled assets essentially in this part of the form, right? So starting off even from the very beginning, right? So we're here in our right wing guard, just like in section 2, defense. Nothing new, right? So the next section makes more sense when you think about using a sword like this one and not a sword like the actual Ssangsu Geombup, which is going to be like almost immediately like kind of revoked because the way back we do a move that makes more sense with a longer sword than a shorter one, right? So I've already talked about how center cuts don't make as much sense with a very long center cut or very long sword, right? But theoretically, we're here. You do a nice quick, so again, pressure forward with quick double step into a center cut, into a roll, and downward into that downward thrust. So a way that we can kind of play with this a little bit is if I was here, I realize I haven't actually been doing too much facing the camera, right? But here, if we do a nice center cut, theoretically, I might be deflected offline. I might make contact maybe with the wrist, but if I want to move on to another strike, so if I'm here, again, either deflected or going through the wrist, instead of necessarily cocking it back to roll into that thrust, potentially a more interesting and more difficult way of doing this would be from here and going after the contact has been made, use that left hand to rip up to keep moving into a thrust. So things to kind of make this, I won't say make sense because this section's application averse, I'll call it that a little bit. But, so let's take a look, right? So if we're here, 1, 2, making contact, rip up. So what I want to think about this one is not necessarily my target's on the ground and I thrust, again, maybe being petty and like get them in the toe, but I'm going to be facing away from me, meaning they should be dealt with. So very similar to when we took a look at Ssangsu Geombup 6, right? Where the motion looks like this, but the idea is impact right there with the follow through drawing down there. So what I would propose to you, and this can also be retconned for earlier, is the idea of, again, we've struck. The idea here is with a quick little double step is I'm making contact here and following through with that strike. So I think that makes a little bit more sense than I cut you, cock it back, roll to cut again or to stab someone in the toe, right? So that's my own interpretation for that one. But the very next move is something that, although it looks really strange, again, you saw a little bit earlier, this one is straight from the Mu de Botonji, right? So from our historical manual. So let's take a look. Once more, something from section 2. We're going to use the backhand of our hand, or backhand of our hand. Nice. English works. So from here, we're going to cover. This, again, for me, is more getting the blade in position as opposed to necessarily blocking. Again, allegedly, it's a longer, heavier weapon. You can use your hand to get the momentum moving. But again, if I see impact coming, I probably would retract this hand and just use this. Or if I really need to, I would use something like this to cover and move down. We're going to see that in our next form. But from here, check, make sure I see what I want to deal with next. This one, I'm going to move forward so you can hopefully see a little bit better. So from here, the hand that's out there is going to sneak behind my right hand, right? So it's not on top of it. It's going to be sneaking behind it this way. And notice it's going to be in a reverse grip, right? So again, so from here, sneak behind, let go of the right hand. As I pivot on my left foot, I'm going to pivot and do essentially an extended knife hand block, give or take, right? So from here, I'm going to release, in, check. Notice this is straight, noticing the hand, elbow, shoulder, other shoulder, all straight into our full knife and block over this way, again in our Bomse. And then from there, just to kind of finish off the form, and before we really play with this a lot, I'm going to bring up over top. I'm going to do this from another angle so you can see a little better. You're going to grab on top of it. Left hand is going to switch. I'm just going to lunge forward into a diagonal cut, switch to reverse grip like in Ssangsu 3, and have a nice classic chakam. Again, choosing either to stand or to go into the full double kneel position. But let me show you that from a couple other angles. Initially, this is going to look like a bad angle, right? But from here, again, check. Again, nosing this way. Left hand comes behind the right. Right hand's going to let go. It's going to come to my ear to set for that block. As I pivot on my left foot, I'm going to turn, and this again, all straight angle, this way, right, right. And then from there, yeah, right, bring it up, grab, switch, lunge, cut, and then once more going into that whoop, chakam. In the event this angle helps, right? But again, so from here, reaching underneath, let go, coming in, block, up, switch, cut, and then you can go into your full chakam from there. To help make sense of that specific position, so I personally wouldn't use it, but it is historical, so we get to try to make it work, right? So again, this is a nice long heavy weapon. We've done our stabbies, right? We're going to check back, switch underneath. Understanding this is already very, very heavy, right? I'm going to pivot it this way just so the crossguard doesn't hit me. I'm going to release, come back this way. Notice my hand is in line with the blade, right? So before my blade was perfectly hidden, my hand was just kind of out there. Like very, very easy target, right, to get hit. But with a longer weapon, heavier, this makes it a lot more annoying, but theoretically, that is now in line with the side of the hand, right? So theoretically, that might come into play somehow, right? So it braces the side of it. So theoretically, if I was struck from behind and yet it hit the sword and not my head, it would be braced, but that also doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So from my understanding, the way it's usually explained is, so from here, I can back away with like a reverse shot, cock it back, whoop, into that position. Again, using that heavier weapon makes it, like this is not an easy position to hold here, unless if I'm like bracing it this way. So it's tricky. It's tricky to kind of make work. So if you have any ideas of how that could actually work, again, in combat without compromising your left wrist, because if you do try it with a heavy weapon, your wrist is like, it's gonna start to creak and crack after a while. So it's not a very comfortable position compared with, again, like our high guards, again, almost vertical high guard, which I can essentially hold ad infinitum, right? So let's play with it. With a shorter weapon like this one, I can probably hold that, for example, obviously much longer, right? But the length of it doesn't help, right? So unless if this is meant to like hide my weapon from someone, which you could do, I suppose, in other ways, like the more classically, just kind of like the dragon sail, right? I personally don't really see a great use for it. Again, it is historical. It is in the Mudo Tonji. I'm sure there are people out there who are like scholars of the Ssangsu that are like, no, man, this is super obvious. But for me, it's a very high risk, minimal reward, right? Because any strike with my left hand is kind of just there. It doesn't have great acceleration. It's not really protective. It's also not very stable, right? So one reason that we have like all these other guards, right? So for example, this one, or even like the lazy version of this one is you can do something really useful from that position. This one, aside from kind of looking kind of cool and it's very photogenic, I don't really see it being super, super useful, right? So obviously, if you have other opinions, please let me know, because I like to have this be a discussion. But that's the end of 12. So as you notice, 12 is a very, very long form. It's one of the longest. I think 13, also called Shimsung, is even longer, right? But we're getting there, right? So congratulations, we've fully gone through all of 12, which is fun. So with that, so in addition to all my usual spiels at the very end, which we're still going to do, make sure you check out the description down below. Again, as much as I love, just being able to give out all this information, it is also really important to find actual people to train with near you, right? So we have, again, 2 versions of a school locator. One of them is wider ranging, but I think the density is smaller, right? Or we also have like a northeast one for the US that's a little bit smaller range, but again, a little bit more dense in terms of like the number of schools per section. So really depending on where you're looking for training, take a look at either of those 2. But with that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, and keep training.